Welcome back to Reynolds Runabouts, everyone. I am Jeffrey Reynolds. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the repair of the transom frame that I had to pull out of this boat due to extensive rot, not only on the transom, but the lower part, but also at some of the ends of the stringers that I have talked about and showed you in previous videos have been repaired. So I'm back onto the transom frame because that's the next step. I have done some framing. I've got the floor in. I don't really want to button up the aft deck until I get the transom in, because when I bring the aft deck framing in, it's going to pull on this transom area, and it's just good to get the transom in, and then we'll just button it up, and the boat will be back to a floatable condition that I can then continue to work on the seats and the floors and the decks and things that will follow. So I'm going to cover that today, and then in a subsequent video I'll have the exterior of the transom frame. I repaired that. Both were done, both had extensive repairs in different ways, and it warranted two videos. So I've done that, and we're going to get on to the interior first, and then we'll move on to the exterior next time. So let's get to work. I am on to the repair of the transom. So like I have done in the past, I'm going to first sand the whole transom from top to bottom and just look for issues of rot that can be covered by stain and varnish, and then just make an assessment about what I need to do with this transom. I'm a little bit concerned about the original edge. This is the lower piece is plywood that was formed in this curve and then laminated together. So probably done with glue back in the day, I'm assuming. I don't think it's a repair. I think it's still the original look. So I'm gonna just sand everything down and then figure out what I have, and then make some decisions about how I want to repair it. I've sanded both sides of the transom. You might remember the exterior of the transom. I started and sanded down and found a lot of horror. So I did the inside because that obviously needs to be checked as well. And I found just a few spots, and where the outside stringers were rotten on the ends, it looks like it also affected the bottom of the transom bow, and on this one as well. The rest looks fine, maybe around the bilge drain hole, which would make sense if the water got in between the layers. And I don't think a lot of people were really worried about sealing that like I do. I thickened epoxy now. All of the fastener or through holes like this, they're going to have water through it. Fasteners get, the bedding compound is there, and the Smiths penetrating epoxy sealer really do a good job of that. But this, we know there's going to be water coming through, and this one had a ferrule, a drain plug tube. Did these, so they're better, but this one obviously was a lot wetter. So I think the plan will be on the inside is to go in with my oscillating tool and just take out the first layer of plywood. It looks like it's one, two, at least 5 layers of plywood, 3 of which are structural, and then the outside one is the veneer. Or it's a little bit thinner, but it's the mahogany, and I think I'm going to take that off as well. That's kind of where it looks like the rod is starting. The rest of this laminated bow bottom is really tight, even on the bottom. So I think the goal is just to take off, I'm sorry, so it's 5 layers of plywood, probably a 16th or an 1/8 each. And the one on the outside looks like the bottom at least is 2 layers deep of rot. So I'll take the last two, layers off the outside, and which will take me flush right up against the, I'll take this, there's a higher level one too. Let me turn this around. It's a lot worse on the outside, which is to be expected. This is where I started the project, removing the plywood, and then just kept going. 1, 2, 3. So I look like I'm going to go down, take 5, which is the veneer coat, and 4, which is the coat below it that got the water got between the veneer coat and the laminated coat and just rotted. So I'm going to take the first 2 off the outside, ferret out with a sander and maybe power plane and get that faired, and then I'll build it back up with 1 piece of marine plywood. And then when I do the decks, that plywood I will cut a piece for the transom as well, so that all that grain and tone match from that same sheet of plywood that the rest of the boat will get. And then some of these are a lot worse, like this bow corner or the cheek. It looks like I might have to do not a complete replacement for surely a large Dutchman, and just scarf in brand new wood, but it's not as bad as it looks. So I'm gonna just start from the inside to get that all done. Then I'll work my way to the outside, and then we'll build this back up, saving at least some of the shape to help me get the new plywood sheets on, and it will have the same look to it, but it'll also, I'll make epoxy all of these edges so that they are good for the long haul and strength. None of the fasteners have come out of the vertical supports. It looks like he might have done, or her, did the vertical support and then put on another sheet of plywood. So it looks like he might have done it in steps. Anyway, it can be fixed. It's really still quite heavy and solid. I just need to get some of this surface stuff fixed, and it'll look a lot better, and it'll be stronger back in the back of the boat. So back to work. You can see how easy that came out. Um, so this is your first layer of plywood. And with plywood, the glue probably at the factory is pretty strong when they make plywood. But I'm thinking that this was probably added, as was the exterior one, for the mahogany look. But if not, it still came right up. And you can see the plywood right here is really good. So the glue did its job in stopping the water, at least from the surface. And then the bottom is pretty good too. Now, there are gaps here that I'm going to address with epoxy and Smiths, but there's no need to get rid of this. So I'm going to do that. This one's done. And using the oscillating tool, which I call my power chisel, I'll go ahead and do this one too. This one I think is worse. So might have to go down 2, but I'm going to start with 1. And then on the upright solid piece, I went down, and it's still punky here. So I have to remove the fastener, and then I'll go down even farther, and I'll just drop in a half lap right onto that with epoxy, and then go ahead and fair that out. So this is going pretty well. Then, of course, there's the back side. So back to work. So I started doing some exploratory cutting with my oscillating tool. Took off the veneer down to this, started cutting into this, finally found the rot about more than halfway. So I thought, I'm not going to do a lap joint in here. I can just go ahead and replace it. And so what I'll do, there's some really nice pieces, like a foot or to 8 inches of good wood left in some of the pieces I took out of the outer stringers that I did a lap joint on, and I'm gonna harvest some of that wood out of that. It's thin enough to get away from the rot on the edges of the original piece from the boat bottom, and I'll be able to put in a nice vertical frame piece and just replace the whole thing. It's not worth the effort to do a lap joint. And the integrity of that wood is good, so I'm going to cut that out and put it in there. So that'll fit in there nicely. I left a little room. You can see a little bit of room there. You need to leave some room in there for your epoxy, thickened epoxy, to get in there and do its job. So what I'll do, I'll put that back in, and then put in my pieces of my plywood and get that faired, and then it'll look just like it did before. This is going to get painted, so this will be faired off, and then I'll paint this so you won't even see the scarf that I'm putting in here or anything else. But I'll always know that the wood is good enough to hold a big motor, and then I can flip it over and I'll work on the back side or the exterior side of the transom frame. I went through and removed the wood that I knew was bad. So this used to be here. This was the corner. It's plywood laminate all the way through. It was bad. So what I do is I just cut it out with the reciprocating saw. And yes, this is where the lumber piece starts. And I'm gonna work on that once I flip it over. I think I can save some of it, maybe even put a hook scarf in, not sure. So what I'm gonna do, I'm removing that, but I've got 1.5 inches of plywood I need to build up. So what I'm gonna do is I've taken this all out and I've taken it down about 1/4 inch. And what I'm gonna do, this is where the wood got good, and it's even good under here, so that's good. It was just on the inside, probably where the water sat. So I cut a new piece of marine Akume plywood, and I'm going to do that. And with the curve, I can clamp this down with 4 clamps, thickened epoxy, and I'll be fine. Thankfully, the other one was quite a bit smaller. I took that out, got to clean that up a little bit yet. Same concept, it's got a little bit of a curve, and I'll put a clamp right in the middle in that with a thickened epoxy, and I left them proud. So when I go to do my final fairing of this hull, or excuse me, the transom, which has a bevel to it, to the outside, I will be able to bevel that correctly. And I will also address what was a problem when the builder did this. He did not get, or she did not get enough um, epoxy or glue when they did the laminate into the crack between the two. There's 5 pieces of plywood total. But the wood is fine. It's just when I get down to doing this, the scarf might take this out anyways. So I'm going to build up that first inner layer to give me the backbone, and then I'll turn this over and I'll scarf this, maybe with some hook scarves, and just lap on each piece individually so I still get that curve, but still get a nice laminate just like it was with new epoxy. So that's the plan going forward. And I'll do that now. I've removed all of the wood that I want, and I'm going to do just a joint. I'm going to keep it the same, lift it a little long so I can make sure I'm good when I do the plywood underneath. So new piece of stock, cut it way down, probably 2/3 of it came off. It was all good wood for the most part. I just kept taking it down, and what I'm trying to do is get it level with this final piece of veneer plywood. This will all come off too, and then the new piece goes on. I can always fair this in and make sure it's perfect. So that one is replaced. I replaced the corner. That will go in later when I get the plywood all laid up. The corner will have something to glue to in addition to this side stock. So today I'm just going to do this, and then I'll work my way. I'll do the back side, the interior, get that piece in, and then I'll scarf this down, and I'll just start laying in laminates that I like, build it up, and then we'll have a new transom bottom corner and the vertical corner, and then the block in the side. So like always, I'm going to wet out both sides with unthickened epoxy. This helps keep the joint from getting starved. So I'm going to goop these both up, and then I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not going to do down here because I have nothing to attach to. I'm going to do up in here. These are both going to be glued today. And remember, a lot of this is going to get covered up when I do the final laminate of the 1/4 inch or thicker veneer plywood that is going to match the deck. I'm just going to make sure everything matches when I order the plywood and get it in. It'll match not only the transom, but I'm going to veneer the dashboard because it's got a lot of holes in it from instruments that are long gone, including a radio. So I'm going to make sure all the plywood that I order from Johnson's Workbench in Charlotte, Michigan is the same, so it'll look really nice. So I've got these all gooped up, and I'm gonna kind of keep an eye on it and go get some thickened, which will make my joint. And I'm going to use the silica filler. It fills in all the little voids, like maybe that little crack there, but it also provides binding. I'll put a little bit of milled glass in there, give it some sticking power. So I'm going to do that next. All right, my joint is still wet. Not seeing any dry spots, which is what I want. That way, this glue that I'm putting on will now stay where it belongs in the joint and not get sucked into the wood, and then leave the silica all by itself and nice and dry. So this is peanut butter. I really want something thick. I got some filling to do in here, and I really want it to be squeezing out. This is where a long screw goes in, so I'll kind of leave that a little open. But I've soaked it because I want it to be um, full of resin so that it won't ever cause problems. I think that might have been some of the issues with um, the rot. Lots of fastener holes deep into the wood, into the plywood, and probably not prepped so that they had any epoxy or anything else in them to keep them from letting water in. So I'm going to use up, I had several scoops of the silica filler by Total Boat, and then I put in a couple scoops of milled fiber as well to give it some holding power. Get that nice and peanut buttered up. And if I don't see squeeze out, then I know I haven't put enough in. So I'm going to just overcompensate. I put a lot on here, so I'm not going to bother here. I think I'll end up putting more of it on the ground. So take my new piece. Get it in there. Now I don't want it to be tight. I want it to be firm. Squeeze out. Squeeze out on the bottom. But I don't want to clamp it so it's hugely tight. So I'm going to put just a few clamps in. Start from the back. Trying to get just enough pressure to, keep it in place while it dries. Don't over squeeze it, because then you will have a starved joint. And then at that point, you just wasted a bunch of time, and you got to clean that back up. So put some over here. I can see my squeeze out over here. And then I'm going to probably get some squeeze out right here on this edge. There it goes. So I got the clamps in where I can. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. And we'll let that rest for a day and cure, and then I can go back and build the plywood up. So that'll be my next step. I'm ready to put the patch on. I'm ready to put this plywood patch on the bottom of the transom. And what this will do, it'll begin the rebuilding of this corner, but also I'll probably come way back here and I'll layer 3 or 4 pieces of other plywood, marine plywood, British Standard 1088, and then I will rebuild the corner in several pieces with laps, and then it'll be a scarf, but I'll have these hard laps. It's just easier to do it that way. And when I do this edge, it's going to be kind of exploring how bad it goes, but I'm thinking right about here. So I might come halfway and just extend all that strength with a new piece of plywood. And then on the bottom is a full sheet that covers the transom for a new look. So taking my unthickened epoxy and I'm adding it to the surface of both the transom and then the patch I'll put on. I've got a little one over here on the other side, much smaller, but I'm going to do it while I've got my resin mixing going on, and then I'll get both of these done, and then tomorrow I'll be able to go ahead and flip this over and Got to put a little patch in there too. I had a little piece of rot in that scarf I did yesterday that I didn't see it, but I didn't like it. So I'm gonna take that out. I took it out, and I'm gonna put a little piece in there later. I have this piece is gonna end up on this shoulder, and that'll give me a nice transition. And I know that I'm keeping it the same angle. The clamps I'm going to use are going to conform to this, which is why I didn't remove anything on the bottom yet. Good clamping, but also I'm using the form that I have right now to make sure that I don't lose that gentle curve that the transom has and gives it the beauty that it does. So I'm going to leave that in there, and then when I get this done, I'll go ahead and I'll remove the plywood until it's bad. So I'm going to go get some thickened epoxy now, let this soak in, and keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't dry out, and I'll get another batch made, and I'll go ahead and put these two patches on. I have my thickened epoxy ready. This has got Total Boat milled fiber in it and Total Boat silica. So I've got a binder, a typical bonder with the silica, and then I've got some fibers in there, add a little more strength. I want to make sure I get all the areas covered, and really the joints. This is where the water will get in, if it gets in. Get this all slathered up. I'm going to want good squeeze out. So this isn't real peanut butter, but I'm going to put it on pretty thick. I want it to really fill in any gaps that I might have missed with my sanding. Kind of ferret it out so I'd have a good flat surface. But there's worse things than having some epoxy sitting in some grooves. I'll put it on here as well. The Total Boat silica doesn't really break down as nice as the West system. I've noticed that. It seems over time it dissolves. If I leave it long enough, I noticed it'll dissolve more. But with the fibers in it, I know I've got lots of little things that are going to help attach it in addition to the resin. Got those both saturated. Got them covered in my thickened epoxy. Put these on. And I've got that little ledge under there. So make sure I do that. I want to forget that. That's going to give me a little registering edge so I don't lose this important angle. And I'm just going to simply put my clamps on, and I'm going to start out right here in the middle, because this is where the bend that I really want. I'm going to get that on the edge of this one and this one. And I'm going to, because the edge is the important part, and I know that if I get the edge, the rest of it will follow. Again, I got to make sure I want to get the curve, but I don't want to squeeze out too much. Then I've got good squeeze out all the way along that edge. Got this registered up here. I'm going to put one down here to get more of that curve. Because this piece will now become an important piece when I do my layups on the bottom side, so that I can get a good curve in there that I can know. There's some good squeeze out. I'll get some more clamps on here, and I'll just clamp this just tight enough to get squeeze out. Then I'll let it go, and I'll let the binder do its work. And I'll do this little patch, and let her go for a day. Well, that will conclude this episode. I'm very happy with how the inner side, the interior side of the transom frame came out. I'm ready to move on to the exterior, which is a lot more issues of rot and repair. This gave me a a really great place to start and learn how to get it to the way I like it. And then obviously you saw I had to build out this side to make the outside easier to fix, just to keep that sweet curve. So I'll call this video, or this episode, to an end, and thank you for tuning in. I hope you're a subscriber. If not, please hit the subscribe button. If you're enjoying the videos or learning or simply just being entertained, please hit the like button. It's always nice to receive positive feedback. If you have any comments or questions, please put those below. Try to keep them positive if you can. If not, don't bother. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.